Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're navigating some incredibly raw and challenging sources. We've got these firsthand autobiographical excerpts from someone referred to just as the buyer from the World Succession Deed, 1498.
Right. And he details some pretty harrowing experiences inside Germany's penal psychiatry system.
Exactly. And we also have a press article that sheds some public light on the incident that put him there. So our mission today is to pull out the key insights from this really personal story.
Focusing particularly on what happened inside the institution and also exploring the buyer's, let's say, unique perspective on it all.
Including what he calls conspiracy facts.
Mm-hmm. It's crucial to remember we're seeing this through his lens, his experiences, his interpretations, which definitely include this bigger narrative he perceives.
It's a powerful look into a world most people don't see, right? From someone right in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
All right, so the story kicks off in May 2012. He's at a psychiatry clinic in Berlin. And the buyer describes this really pivotal moment. The Chefarzt, that's the chief physician, that doctor, basically.
Okay.
He allegedly threatened to unlawfully detain the buyer's mother for 10 years in penal psychiatry.
10 years?
Yeah.
Without a legal warrant?
That's what the buyer claims. He says it was specifically to force him to start a lawsuit, and by doing that, extract international jurisdiction from him. That's his phrasing.
Wow. Okay, so how did he react to that? I mean, that's a pretty extreme threat.
His reaction was immediate and violent. He says he pulled a curved finger knife from his jacket and just like that, stabbed the Chefarzt full force in the neck.
Good heavens. And he called that his way of suing.
Yes, that's exactly what he said.
That's intense.
And his interpretation is just as striking. He claims it wasn't, an impulsive lash out.
No?
No, he believes it was a premeditated provocation. Set up, he says, by Secret Service or the deep state.
To what end? Why would they do that, according to him?
To justify locking both him and his mother up indefinitely. That's his assertion.
So it wasn't just a personal conflict in his eyes. It was like a strategic move against him.
Exactly. And get this, the Chefarzt survived the stabbing.
Okay.
But the buyer claims he was punished as if the doctor had died. And his mother, even though she wasn't involved in the stabbing itself, she was also implicated. He uses the term Sippenhaft.
Sippenhaft. Like kin liability. Collective punishment.
Precisely. Holding the family responsible.
That's a term with a very dark history in Germany.
It is. Now, the press reports from around that time, they do confirm some details. The buyer, who was 36 then, and his mother, 61, were on trial for knife attacks.
Yeah.
The reports mention he identified himself as King of Kayberg, and his mother believed he was the supreme judge.
So there were clearly some unusual beliefs involved.
Yes, and both were diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia for him, delusional disorders for her, according to the reports. They apparently believe their actions were justified because of some alleged diplomatic status.
Right. And the buyer even demanded the death penalty for officials involved.
That's what the press reported at the time. So after this stabbing incident, what happened immediately?
Well, the buyer describes being instantly subjected to a 5-point fixation. Right there.
5-point fixation. What does that involve exactly?
It sounds awful.
Yeah.
Basically being strapped to a hospital bed. Multiple straps. One under the feet with buckles, he says.
Yeah.
Another around the hips to keep the hands down.
Okay.
And a final one across the shoulders. Plus another for his legs, keeping them parallel in the middle of the bed. He describes being totally immobilized. Only his head could move.
Just completely restrained. The impact of that must have been.
He calls it sheer psychoterror. He gives this example like even a simple itch on his nose became agony because he couldn't scratch it.
Oh, God. And how long did this last?
He claims it lasted 14 days for him. And, get this, 6 weeks for his mother.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. And he insists neither of them were being aggressive or violent at that point. He sees it purely as revenge, as torture.
And during this time, were they medicated?
Oh, yes, heavily. He talks about powerful psychopharmaceuticals, calls it chemical fixation, or a concrete syringe.
A concrete syringe.
Yeah. He describes the doctor injecting him really aggressively, even twisting the needle and saying, "That was my boss you stabbed."
Wow. Yeah.
And the physical effects he claims were devastating. Total muscle wastage, needing a wheelchair afterwards, pain for 6 months.
Just from being immobilized and drugged.
That's his account.
Yeah.
And Adding to all that, he talks about the humiliation. He says he tried not to urinate or defecate for the whole 14 days.
For 2 weeks, how is that even possible?
It led to extreme constipation when he was finally released, as you can imagine. Just an incredibly degrading experience he described.
And then they got a bill for it.
Yep. He and his mother, who he says was uninsured, later got a bill, around €950 per day for the fixation period.
Which they saw as paying for.
Unnecessary, illegal torture, in their words.
So this initial experience, this fixation, it was just the beginning.
According to him, yes. Just the gateway to Blacksite Berlin. That's his name for the penal psychiatry facility. He calls it an end station, a sighting.
Blacksite Berlin, he describes it as a specific place.
Yes, Germany's largest facility for mentally ill offenders, he says. Part of it, relatively new, built in '86, but a huge, older section dating back to 1880.
So a place with a long history.
A very long and, according to him, very dark history. He describes high walls, double-fenced courtyards, NATO barbed wire, grim stuff.
And the history inside those walls.
He details beatings, ice baths, electroshock therapy, which he claims still happens today.
Still, electroshock.
That's his claim. And even lobotomies, historically, which weirdly enough did win someone a Nobel Prize once, though obviously highly controversial now.
That's unbelievable.
He also talks about the Nazi era. Patients being gassed in vans, using exhaust fumes, and the old crematorium on site, he says, is now the facility's heating plant.
That's chilling. So how does he see conditions today compared to that history? Still problematic?
Very much so, in his view. He claims Blacksite Berlin was severely overcrowded in 2023. Like 619 patients for only 549 official beds.
Overcrowded. And what's the consequence of that, according to him?
He argues it forces them to release dangerous people too early, and he makes this provocative statement like, kennel dogs have more space than the patients inside.
He also mentioned something about staffing.
Yeah, he claims staff aren't actually busy because patients are mostly left alone, leading to really high sick leave rates. But then he says the institution uses the claim of understaffing to get more public money.
Okay, so let's talk about daily life inside this Blacksite Berlin as he experienced it.
Right. He spent his first week in isolation, then moved to an admission station, and then to what he calls Crisis Station 8B.
Crisis Station 8B. Sounds ominous.
He labels it the most dangerous station, full of, in his words, absolutely uncontrollable, highly aggressive patients. He says there were conflicts and fights happening daily.
And the confinement itself. It's under a specific German law, right? Section 63.
Yes. Section 63 is TGB, the German Criminal Code. And the key thing here is that the stay is, in principle, unbefristed, indefinite, potentially for life.
For life, even for minor offenses.
That's one of his most startling claims. He gives an example, stealing 2 vodka bottles. He says patients can end up there for an average of 8 years for something like that. He even saw one case, he claims, that lasted 42 years.
42 years for stealing vodka. That seems disproportionate.
He argues the official reason that mental illnesses are incurable, and it's for public safety, is just a cover.
So what does determine release, in his view?
He believes it all comes down to the goodwill of the therapists, which he says leads patients to just lie and say whatever they think the therapists want to hear to get out.
That sounds like a really dysfunctional system, if true. What about the other patients? What's the social environment like?
He observes that over 30% are sexual offenders, various types, pedophiles, rapists. He describes them pretty contemptuously, focusing on their perceived lack of control and often domineering attitudes.
He makes a distinction about pedophilia, though, doesn't he?
Yes, he notes it's considered not a mental illness, but a sexual preference, and therefore not curable in the traditional sense. He says even chemical castration injections only partly work.
And he contrasts these 63-year patients, the ones under Section 63, with indefinite stays.
Right, he contrasts them with the 64 patients. Those are under Section 64, usually people with drug-induced psychosis. Their stays are limited, typically 2 to 4 years. So a very different situation.
He uses a strong analogy to describe the overall feel of the place, right?
Yeah, he calls Blacksite Berlin a communist state within a state.
Meaning?
Psychologists as tyrants, other staff as scoundrels, just enforcing arbitrary rules. Constant surveillance, he says, even fellow patients acting as Stasi spies.
Wow. And strict rules about property, too?
Extremely strict. Maximum 30 media items, CDs, DVDs, whatever. No cell phones, no internet, no recording devices. All officially justified, of course, but he sees it as pure control.
And they enforce this how?
Regular unannounced room searches. He says he felt stripped of all autonomy, like a kid having to ask permission for everything.
And this feeling is compounded by his belief about the property itself.
Exactly. Because he asserts the actual buildings the land Blacksite Berlin sits on are his property, based on this World Succession Deed 147098.
Okay.
So from his viewpoint, the staff aren't just controlling him, they're illegally occupying his land and operating outside German law.
That adds a whole other layer to his resistance, like the work therapy.
Yeah, he calls it slave labor. It pays like 33 to 99 cents an hour for garden work or pottery, 5 hours a day.
And he refused to do it.
Says he's a total refuser as a protest. Even the food he describes as just bland, reheated microwave hospital stuff that he had to endure for a decade.
Okay, let's shift to the treatment itself, specifically the medication, the psychopharmaceuticals. This seems central to his experience.
Absolutely central. He calls them chemical torture and absolute zombie drugs.
Strong words. What kind of effects did he describe?
A whole terrifying range. Extreme sedation, first off, feeling slow, sedated, constantly tired. He says he could sleep 20 hours a day sometimes.
20 hours.
Yeah. And sometimes lie totally unresponsive for 3 days straight.
That sounds less like treatment and more like incapacitation.
That's how he frames it. And the cognitive effects, too. He couldn't follow movies, had trouble reading, memory loss, just feeling mentally dull. Like vegetables in the head, he says.
He mentioned backflash surges, too.
Yeah, like even days after stopping a drug, he'd suddenly feel sedated again or experience side effects, like it was still lingering in his system.
And the physical side effects sound just as bad.
Oh, definitely. Uncontrolled drooling, intense internal restlessness, like needing to constantly move, muscle cramps, restless leg syndrome.
Weight gain, too, right?
Significant weight gain. He claims he gained 10 kilograms, is about 22 pounds every year, leading to what he calls a dung beetle figure.
And vision problems. Split cramp.
Yes, eye spasms, where his eyes would involuntarily roll upwards for up to 3 hours, causing temporary blindness and this fear they might get stuck like that permanently.
That sounds incredibly scary.
And epileptic seizures, too, which he blames entirely on the meds, collapsing, nearly biting his tongue off. Plus, digestive issues, chronic constipation, extreme flatulence.
And then there was the effect on his libido.
Yes, profound impotence and loss of libido. He explicitly calls it chemical castration.
And says he felt worse than a child molester because of it.
Yes, because of that loss of what he sees as a basic human function. It clearly had a massive impact on his sense of self.
So his overall view of these drugs, therapeutic value?
Essentially zero, in his opinion.
Yeah.
He strongly believes they don't cure any underlying madness. They just sedate people.
Making them inactive and less dangerous, but not actually less crazy.
Exactly. That's his core argument. He sees the whole long-term indefinite medication regime as basically human experimentation.
Ruse benefit.
He points fingers at the pharmaceutical industry and the psychologists, arguing the science just isn't far enough along to justify what they're doing.
How were these drugs given? Was it always voluntary?
Not according to him. He describes frequent forced injections, multiple staff members holding him down. He considers this dangerous bodily harm.
And he suspected covert methods, too.
Yes. He claims drugs were secretly mixed into his food and drinks, or that his room was even gassed with sedatives, particularly if he only pretended to take his pills.
Gassed? Seriously?
That's his claim. He believes these covert methods were deliberate, designed to stress patients out, provoke reactions, and thus provide more justification for controlling them.
Okay, this brings us to the staff themselves. How does he describe the people working at Blacksite Berlin?
Not favorably, to put it mildly. He paints a picture of them being incompetent, corrupt, malicious, and even psychologically disturbed.
Wow, that's a sweeping condemnation. He distinguishes between roles, right? The Flieger?
Yes, the Fliegers, the nurses or caregivers, the frontline staff, basically. He calls them the enforcers of forced measures.
Including the forced medication.
Yes, holding patients down, threatening them. Yeah. He also describes them as lazy, always on their phones, with sky-high sick leave rates, which means minimal staffing levels in reality.
And corrupt, too.
That's a major accusation he makes. Scrupulous, corruptible, sneaky, and evil. He claims they often smuggle forbidden things in for patients' drugs, mobile phones.
Oh, for money.
Sometimes for money, yeah. and even tipping patients off about upcoming room searches.
So, undermining the facility's own rules, what about the psychologists? He uses that as a broad term, right?
Yeah, for all the mental health professionals.
Real.
He labels their field a pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience.
Yes, he calls them absolutely incapable, giving diagnoses that contradict each other, offering advice he found useless or even bizarre.
Like what kind of advice?
He gives examples like telling a patient to cope with stress by making pig noises, or suggesting someone use an imaginary protective cloak.
Pig noises. Okay.
And he makes this really provocative statement. No one in human history has ever been cured of madness by words.
That's a pretty absolute dismissal of psychotherapy.
It is. And he goes further, claiming that many of the staff themselves, psychologists and nurses, are taking psychopharmaceuticals and getting psychological treatment.
He thinks they work in psychiatry to understand their own issues.
That's his theory. He even describes his own station psychologist looking unkempt, like a zombie, and later going on sick leave because her own mental state was deteriorating.
He calls it a sad reality.
Yeah, and says even the patients mock the staff sometimes.
Now, how does this view of the staff connect back to his larger conspiracy facts narrative?
He sees them not just as incompetent or troubled individuals, but as remotely controlled agents?
Agents of the Secret Service or deep state he mentioned earlier?
Exactly. He believes this network uses psychological manipulation to achieve bigger goals. He gives the example of officials in Zweibrücken.
Who he claims were manipulated to dispossess him.
Right. Unknowingly playing a part in this larger conspiracy, leading eventually to what he calls völkerstrafrechtliche Verantwortung, international criminal responsibility.
Shifting responsibility to powerful political leaders.
Yes, after 10 years pass, without prosecution for the initial alleged crimes against him, it's all part of the NWO New World Order plan, as he sees it.
A plan aimed at.
Maximum conflict, that's his interpretation.
Okay, so given this whole experience, this perspective, what about release? Is there a path out?
He describes it as a very gradual, often illusory process. Starts with tiny steps and unlocking of privileges.
Like excursions outside.
Yes, first accompanied excursions, a strict one-to-one staff-to-patient ratio. He says just getting to that stage can take years.
Years just for a supervised walk.
Apparently. Then maybe group excursions, 1 staff to 3 patients, and eventually solitary excursions.
Which he notes people often use to escape.
Right. He says he would have done the same if he'd gotten that far.
So actual release is rare.
Yeah, very rare, according to him. More often, patients get put on leave, maybe to a halfway house or supervised individual living.
But still under conditions.
Oh, absolutely. Strict conditions. Continued therapy, mandatory medication, work assignments, often menial tasks like cleaning toilets, he says, for maybe €2 an hour.
And if they slip up.
Any violation means straight back to Blacksite Berlin.
Now, throughout all this, the buyer himself took a very specific stance towards therapy and evaluation, didn't he?
A completely radical stance. He refused all therapy sessions and all expert evaluations for his entire stay.
Why? What was his reasoning?
He saw it as a deliberate strategy to prevent his enemies, as he calls them, from getting any insight into his thinking. He believed that insight would just allow them to harm him more effectively.
So if he refused evaluation, what did they base their assessments on?
He claims they just created criminal, disparaging fantasy evaluations about him anyway. Made things up, essentially.
Despite this, he talks about resilience.
Profound resilience, yeah. Forged, he says, through decades of damage. He claims it's made him psychically resilient.
Meaning?
He doesn't take personal attacks to heart anymore. He sees everything through the larger lens of these conspiracy facts.
So how does one respond when they believe they're caught in such a huge conspiracy? Does he want revenge?
Remarkably,
Yeah.
no. Despite describing constant torture and manipulation that he believes was designed to provoke rage, he expresses a desire to offer general amnesty to his tormentors.
General amnesty? Why?
He says it's strategic, to disrupt the Secret Service's divide and rule plan, the plan that he thinks wants maximum conflict, and the NWO.
So it's another move in this perceived game.
Seems so, though he admits he feels powerless to actually stop the overall plan, which he believes has been unfolding meticulously for decades.
And finally, he issues this warning about the statute of limitations.
Yes, specifically in the context of international criminal law. He argues that continuous harm, like indefinite detention, actually stops the clock on the statute of limitations. It doesn't run out.
So people who think they've gotten away with things after, say, 30 years,
He compares them to someone falling from a skyscraper who looks up mid-fall and thinks nothing bad has happened yet.
Because the ground is still coming.
Exactly. He asserts their actions will eventually face consequences under international criminal law, and he predicts this responsibility will shift upwards to powerful political figures after 10 years of impunity.
Leading to what?
A brutal conflict, he warns, between the original perpetrators and those political figures now held responsible. It's a pretty stark prediction.
Wow. We've certainly covered a lot. A truly uh, profound deep dive into the experiences of the buyer from the World Succession Deed 120098. Navigating this system, he paints as, well, institutionalized control, manipulation, chemical torment.
It's an incredibly powerful, very personal account, and crucially seen entirely through his specific lens, his conspiracy facts, this larger narrative of global power and control.
Absolutely. His struggle for dignity, for agency, against what he sees as this relentless, oppressive system with hidden agendas. It's undeniable, regardless of how you interpret the specifics. So maybe a final thought for the listener to chew on. When someone like the buyer frames their intense personal suffering not just as personal, but as a strategic tool in a much larger, darker, global narrative, what does that tell us? What does it reveal about our human capacity for resilience, for interpretation, and maybe for finding meaning even in the most extreme circumstances?